I would say that for about 3.5-ish years after I finished up my undergraduate degree at McGill, I was depressed. For the longest time, I didn't really know how to make sense of what was going on, but in March of 2016, at age 25, I kind of hit this breaking point, and a coworker of mine took me to the emergency room at a Montreal hospital. And that was really the starting point where I started to properly acknowledge that I was depressed and that I was struggling with mental health. And from there, I really committed myself to slowly but surely doing something about it. From therapy to psychiatrist to medication, I really started to do something about it. If I could describe post university, like immediate post university, in one word, it would be shock. It's a shock to the system. I've talked about it with others, and it really is for those of us who have attended post-secondary education during those formative, like 17, 18 to 22, 23 years of age. It really is one of the biggest life transitions that we'll go through. I really had no idea what to expect, and sure enough, it was not at all like what I had expected. Again, it's just this shock to your system. Okay, so just to quickly mention, since this is the first video, throughout this video series, I'll be showing B-roll footage of me busking in a Montreal metro station. As I mentioned in one of the introductory videos, the worst part of having depression for me was not being able to get out of bed. And I told myself that when I got to the point where I had overcome my depression, I would essentially make a statement out of it by stepping out of my comfort zone and trying something that I thought would be pretty much the opposite of staying in bed. For me, that thing was setting the goal of getting to metro stations 24 times in 8 weeks and teaching passersby basic social psychology terms, theories, and experiments, and doing so over instrumentals from popular songs. The idea to go busk really came about like 2 years ago when I saw this Jimmy Fallon clip on YouTube of U2 busking in the skies in New York in Grand Central. And I just remember thinking, man, I would love to do that one day, but with teaching psychology over instrumentals instead. So yeah, 2 years later, and I'm pushing to get that accomplished. Okay, so looking back on that immediate post-university life, in a lot of ways, it really does make sense why one can become depressed. And for me, it also really makes sense why I became depressed. And hopefully, in these next 24 videos, by talking a bit about my experiences, I can touch upon some of those common themes that a lot of recent grads, not so recent grads, parents, current students can hopefully relate to. But before I delve into all these common themes, first and foremost, I can say that from looking back on my experience, a huge contributing factor was the fact that I blamed myself way too much for what I was going through. Straight up, I was way too hard on myself. For those of you who have seen Good Will Hunting, you of course know that one scene where Robin Williams' character, a psychologist named Sean, keeps repeating to Matt Damon's character, Will, it's not your fault. That all the negative stuff that he had been through growing up with his foster parents and all that it wasn't his fault. Like Sean just kept repeating, it's not your fault. And Will, he tries to resist it first, but then he just breaks down and starts sobbing and just embraces Sean, and it's really a very powerful scene. And the way that I interpreted that scene was that probably for the first time in Will's life, someone was giving him a break. Someone was allowing him to give himself a break. Will was being allowed to truly tell himself, like past like surface level telling himself, like truly deep down tell himself that what he had gone through was not his fault. Now, for those of you who have seen the movie, what Will had gone through in his past is it's pretty different than depression or than post-university depression. I don't want to give away a lot of the movie in case people haven't seen it, but the point that I'm trying to get across is that it's very easy to blame yourself, to overly blame yourself for stuff that at the present moment you don't fully understand, and for stuff that in our case ultimately is quite common for us to go through once we finish university. So yeah, right after McGill, I didn't fully understand what I was going through, and as a result, it became very easy to blame myself. I mean, like, I'm the one who's going through it, so it must be my fault, right? On top of that, you hear from a lot of people, and let me emphasize here, from a lot of well-meaning people with good intentions, you hear from them the rational, logical things like, it's okay, it's just a phase, things will get better, you got this. And then you hear things like, just dig deep, you just gotta push through. Think positive, you just gotta find out what you want and just stick with it. And of course, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. The peak, I find, comes when you end up feeling guilty for feeling this way, for feeling that you shouldn't feel depressed, and instead you should just feel good and proud because you have an education and you are more fortunate than a lot of people out there. My emotions were like in this internal battle with my rationale, and the fact that there were these rational solutions to getting past the way I was feeling, and that there were these catchphrases like, you'll figure it out, really fucked with me and made me just beat myself up and bully myself for struggling after university. If anything, the most rational thing to have considered was that it's actually not uncommon to go through all this, and that it's pretty much inevitable that such a large transition has the potential to produce mentally tough times. So to wrap up this first video and to kind of set a vibe for the upcoming videos, I truly believe that a common theme for many of us is to beat ourselves up when we don't fully understand why something is going wrong. What a lot of us need to hear, and what even I still need to hear, is that it's not your fault.